Welcome back, everyone.
Yeah, I was gonna do another one of our musical intros, but you know what? I thought I don't even want to butcher the
It's a
intro to this
difficult one.
because
It's a difficult one.
I mean I attempted it briefly before the recording, but I feel like this one needs to remain special and not brutalized like all my other renditions. Witness me, Joe.
Yeah. Welcome back to 2MoreTakes, everyone.
My name is Jack.
My name is Joe. We're talking about films
again.
Morton
Joe?
Morton Joe? Oh, I could be.
Do you want the big old Darth Vader mask?
Yeah? Not really, but...
No, not really.
He's not really a
you
looker,
have all those boils that he's got. No. He's got some great wives. Today we're doing Mad Max Fury Road. I'm very excited. This is probably the most uplifted I'm going to see him during this season. So, yeah. I mean, this is a bit different, obviously, because I know we've done a few more recent films. I guess with the Guardians of the Galaxy films and the we did that Justice League, analysis and that. But typically we do sort of cult stuff. That being said, despite the fact this came out in 2015, I kind of do see it as one of those. It has stood the test of time kind of movies, and I don't know whether you'll feel the same about this, or whether this is a controversial thing to say, but I think, in my opinion, this is a modern classic.
I think it definitely has potential. I'm not 100% on Mad Max. I've seen it once before we rewatched it the other day.
Yes, I know you said after we rewatched it together that initially you weren't so hot on it.
No, I don't think it's bad. I enjoy it. I think it's good, but I don't think it's.
Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to out you there. I was just trying to.
No. I don't have much bad to say about Mad Max, but it didn't stand out to me the first time I watched it. Unfortunately.
Did you watch it in the cinema? By the way, I just wondering.
No, I don't believe I did.
Okay, because that is one thing we have in common. Do you know whenabouts you watched it? Because I think I watched it about 2 years after its release, in about 2017. I think was the first time I watched it.
I watched it later on.
Okay.
I think it came onto Netflix or something at some point, or
yeah. Okay, so I think I don't know where I got this from, but I had it in my head that you had seen it in the cinema when it came out.
No, not Mad Max.
Okay. No, fair enough. I don't know if you remember, but back when this film came out, there was a big old hype train going on. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of I guess, controversy to this film as well, which we can get into later.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, this was one of those films that when I was a teenager and I was dumb and I didn't have a fully developed brain, my friend gave me the pitch for this film, and he said, he said it's a film with a ton of cars in it, and where the labelled main character of the film, Mad Max, is not the main character. And because I was a dumb kid, I said, so probably not for me. Because I didn't like Fast and Furious and stuff like that. So I thought, it's probably one of those car movies. I fucking hate those. And then skip to 2 years later, I watch it for the first time, fresh perspective, no sort of hype train to be sort of riding on. And I fucking loved this film. I still do. So I have a much, much more warmer place in my heart for this. I think this actually. I know this time last year, roughly, we were making. There was a trend on social media to make a top 10 list of your favorite movies. You did it, and I ended up doing it 3 times because I got challenged 3 times by people, and I think Mad Max actually made it somewhat. I think Mad Max made it onto the list. Fury Road. So, but I don't know whether it did or not because it was so long ago. But I mean, it is one of those films it's one of the few modern films I think that I just adore, and that I think is. I do think that in a few years, here's the thing. I think the problem is with calling it a classic is that a lot of people define that as films that have been pre-established and are in the past. And I don't know. I don't know whether I classify them like that. I think a classic is something that how Steven Spielberg films have that sort of wow factor.
Yeah.
I think this film has that. Not in the Steven Spielbergian way of the well-rounded sort of everyman stuff. This is super focused in what it's doing. It's very specific, and I think it executes it near flawlessly. If anything, I have maybe one criticism filmmaking-wise about the film. And that's more because it's like a more noticeable thing. There are, of course, nitpicks that you can have. There's your typical thing of you put the details of a film's world up to scrutiny. You're going to find plot holes. But I think differently to something like our last film, Independence Day. I think this film is one of those films where the suspension of disbelief is earned, and there's also fewer of those issues, I think. But yeah, so obviously before we get into it, is there any more that you want to add?
There will be things to say when we get to certain bits, but
yeah, because I know that obviously we might not differ we might not differ drastically, but I know that we're going to differ on a few things.
Yeah, I mean, when you say the whole suspension of disbelief, and I'm like, yeah, it's definitely there are you're immersed in the world of Mad Max when you're watching it, but when I think about it, I'm like, it's a bit much, isn't it? Logically.
A bit much, Joe. Yes, yeah, no, it is. It's the perfect. I think it's the perfect amount of much. To be fair, but yeah, no. To be fair, that's probably a unique criticism that I've heard about this film, or the films like this. I mean, is that it's a bit much for me.
Yeah.
I think most people they sort of go for the it's just a load of chaotic nonsense. But yeah, no, I sorry, that caught me off guard. Yeah, it is a bit much, to be fair.
Like when you say, have I seen it at the cinema? And I think it'd probably be really good to watch at the cinema because it's very much an actiony, chaotic.
Yeah.
Like the noise, the soundtrack, they're all of that would look really cool on the big screen. But I don't think it's so much of a laid back film. There's no sort of, it's difficult to word.
Yeah.
But
I have to say, I think that's one of the reasons why. Well, it's not. That's one of the surface level sort of vapid reasons why I would want this to be a modern classic and seen as that. Yeah. I desperately want to see this in the cinema because we've Independence Day gets shown in the cinema every week in one of these cinemas in any of the major cities in the UK. I want to see Mad Max in the big screen. But yeah, I suppose just to get on with things, I'll briefly summarize the plot.
Yeah.
Okay, have you ever played Super Mario, Joe?
I mean, a little bit, not terribly much. But
yeah. Imagine that your main character's a Bowser. That is this film. And Morton Joe, who is the villain of this film, is Mario. Basically, we get introduced to Mad Max, played by Tom Hardy, who is captured in the beginning of the film. It's more like a prologue, really. It's not really the beginning of the film, because I think the beginning of the film is really when Furiosa gets introduced. Because if you count that as the beginning of the film both begins and ends with her on that lift, going up and down.
Yeah.
She goes down because she's sort of a servant of this tyrant, and she needs that redemption. Whereas when she's redeemed herself, she's lifted up by the people. But yeah, so that Mad Max bit at the beginning is more to sort of introduce him as the perspective character rather than our protagonist. Our protagonist is introduced right after that sort of chase sequence through the Citadel with Mad Max. I'm going to call him Mad Max. His name's Max, but yeah. Furiosa, anyway, she's introduced. She has the big old war rig, which is this big old tanker truck that is armored to the teeth. They all think they're going to go to Gastown. Secretly, she's smuggling out Immortan Joe, who is the big bad of this place, who looks like a sort of albino Darth Vader with his Bane mask.
Yeah.
That's another connection, But basically, so she smuggles them out, and she's going to take them to what's called the Green Place. It's supposedly a place where she grew up herself. And the wives are they're basically, some of them are pregnant. They want to escape the Morton Joe's wrath, essentially. And Max is sort of caught in the middle of it, just trying to survive. And eventually he sides with them. And it's basically just the entire film is just one big chase sequence. Eventually, Nicholas Holt's Warboy is he's not introduced. He's introduced at the beginning. With sort of right around after Furiosa goes rogue. And you have some great sort of world building there and stuff like that. But he's a war boy that turns good, and about, I guess, like halfway through the movie, he sort of sides with the characters. They end up getting to the green place. It's lost. They realize that the real green place was where they came from. That they just have to take it for themselves. They head back. They defeat the bad guys, and everything's good and happy and all that. And that's the film.
Yeah.
The plot itself is not the most intricate thing, but I will say that the pacing and the story of this film is fantastic, in my opinion. I think that for a 2-hour film, this does not feel 2 hours. When we were watching it, I felt like this is like an hour and 20 minutes right now, because it is just one big chase sequence, and there are very few moments where the action dries up. Even in the moments where you probably think back and go, "Oh, the action dried up here," like when like the war rig is trapped in the mud or whatever. There's still like action going on, and there's still tension to what's going on because they have to snipe the bullet farmer dude on his tank tread muscle car. But really, there's only a few moments, like at the in the second nighttime sequence, which is actually quite brief, to be fair, where the plot does slow down and we get some more sort of we get some more like character focused stuff where the characters are sort of debating what to do. But yeah, and then besides that, it's just a very well made film. It's exciting. It's just exciting. It's the definition of a thrill ride. If I was going to think of like modern action films, there are very few I would put on this sort of pedestal that I would with this one. I think John Wick is a modern example of like how to do your more sort of like gun shooty man action. Like your classic Die Hards and stuff like that. It's like modernizing that. Yeah, but it's got a similar sort of thing in that like the protagonist is kind of a caveman who grunts a lot.
Yeah.
Like, Keanu Reeves doesn't really say much, he just kicks ass, and so does Max in this film. Tom Hardy.
In terms of the action sequences, this film is very good. It's got a lot going on, and I think they've got a lot of both practical and CGI effects that are done very well.
They blend together really well. Yeah, a lot of them. Because I think most of the cast, well, I think all of the car stuff, with the exception of the sand tornado that lifts up the exploding car.
Yeah.
Pretty much, they destroyed all of those cars. In fact, I think that about 62 cars out of the 150 that were made for this film were destroyed. Like, completely totaled, which is... You were saying this in the Blues Brothers talk, I think, or when we were watching the film. Like, that wouldn't get done today, that sequence in the shopping centre.
Yeah.
I think George Miller, that's something that he just brought back from the past. It's like, yeah, we're going to use practical cars and blow them up, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, I know there's a lot of creative stuff done with all those cars, because all those cars look unique. They're all very wacky. That's kind of the iconic thing with Mad Max, isn't it? Is the vehicles looking like they've just been handmade. Yeah. In the desert, and then every weapon possible is attached to them. But
yeah, it's the more, I guess, in a way, the more grounded, but also the more sort of like aesthetically. I guess coherent version of the sort of the trucks they make in the Dawn of the Dead remake with like the slits for chainsaws. I think there's like a machine gun on them and stuff like that. Basically, they're zombie killing like trucks. But in this, it's like you've got like everything's been sort of, as you say, ramshackled together. It all feels like it feels like in a zombie apocalypse or it feels like a very Evil Dead 2, where it's like, we're going to makeshift our way to victory here. I'm going to make myself a chainsaw hand or something,
Yeah. Controversial opinion already from me. I'm not a fan of any of those vehicles. They're a bit much.
What?
Like, some of them are like, they're kind of cool, but...
What do you mean? They're all cool.
Nah.
Okay, sorry. I know it's very arbitrary to say. I please explain. I don't know. It's just I'll give you a chance.
Because I like the idea of they're all makeshift. They're trying to make them all look intimidating and made out of scrap and all that. But logically, I also think, but why? Why did they look? Why is this car's just covered in spikes? A bit much. Some of them are really over the top. Some of them are like cool over the top, and then it's a weird sort of. That's the thing that kind of breaks me sometimes, where I'm like, but how would they make that? Like, how the hell did they put that together? It doesn't.
Okay, I can see where you're getting from here, Jim. I do need to. Okay, this is, by the way, this is not a comment as a fan, because neither of us have seen the other Mad Max films, but I do know some people who have seen it. I also know secondhand what a lot of it's like, and I've seen, I've as you said, you've seen bits of it, I've seen bits of it. I do need to point out something, Joe, and that is that you're pointing out the realism in a Mad Max film.
I know.
About how they put their cars together. In the third one, there's a dwarf on the shoulders of a regular guy, and he's called Master Blaster.
Well, it's Mad Max.
This is definitely taking the more realistic approach comparatively.
Yeah, possibly.
The spikes thing, that's more for an aesthetic choice of like distinguishing the factions, though. Like, there's the guys with all of the sort of streamers and sort of fluff on them. You know, the guys on bikes. Yeah. I mean, I think similar to the issue that... Here's the thing, is that... I don't... Obviously, I can understand where you're coming from with that. I don't agree, I think, but...
Well, the thing,
but in terms of like the pointing out the logic, like, I think it's different in the case of like, okay, I know that last time, for instance, I poked all sorts of holes in the foundation of Independence Day, but I think that's more because that was a film that was... like, in terms of, again, the practical filmmaking in some instances was really good, but the sort of the narrative and the how the direction of the actors and all that stuff, it was all very flat to me in a lot of respects. But I do think in this instance, this is a case where I like, again, I know that suspension of disbelief is a very vibe check thing. I know we call this the vibe check. It's like, sometimes it just feels like that. And I feel like this is probably an instance for you right here. Because it's an instance for me where it's like, okay, I can tolerate that, but perhaps for you, it's something that is distracting. That said, though, I do think that it's cohesive, differently to something like some of the issues that I had with, like some of the metaphorical issues or some of the like the comparisons they make in Independence Day, like chess thing, for instance. I think that like in this film, the things like that with the spikes on cars and the things that are a bit much. I mean, I'm surprised you haven't talked about the guy with the flamethrower guitar yet, because I think he's the most in the entire film.
He's very much.
That guy is the most.
But also, like,
but I think that's something that I love about this film, and is that I love the chaos, and I think that in some ways, there's not really a way that you could go more than this. I mean, how the hell do you top this as an action film? And obviously, I know you could say, well, maybe they went a bit far over the line. Maybe if they dialed it back a bit. But I think for a Mad Max film and whole premise, I think that it's completely within the bounds of the world's reality for that to work.
This is why I say you get immersed in the world of Mad Max and not in a necessarily real world, because it is very, very out there, and that's a thing I recognise even before I watched the film. I'm like, oh, it's a film where, there's loads of wacky cars and all sorts going on. You got war boys with flamethrowers and guitars, and it's all over the place. But
cancerous tumours and stuff. Yeah.
But for me personally, I'm like,
He's named them.
I'm not really into any of that. It's a bit much for me.
Yeah.
But I can see why people would find...
Yeah,
I could see why people would find it cool. And, it's like, oh, look how cool this car look how menacing this one is. This one's wacky as hell. And I'm like... Yeah, I'm just more into... Yeah. I'm always into more realistic aesthetics, I think. So...
Yeah. No, that's something I can definitely get, I think, a bit more. Is it obviously, in terms of genre, it's like recently I was watching, for the first time, Assault on Precinct 13 by John Carpenter.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting film. I very much like it. I think it's one I definitely would recommend to you, just because you're also another film aficionado. But I don't know if it's a sort of film I would recommend to other people because there's a lot of violence, like really, shocking depictions of violence in it. But there's also not that much that happens overall in the story. It's mostly just sort of people talking in a police precinct about what's going on. But still, it's like it's compelling. It's compelling to me because of how it's being handled, the performances, the writing. There's an element of that film where it's like. There's a similar suspension of disbelief, not to this sort of the same. It's not 1-to-1 with this film, but there's one of the readings I took from it when I watched the film is that there's the possibility that you could attribute sort of supernatural powers to the bad guys in that film because of all of the bizarre stuff that happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I again though that films like that are difficult to recommend because that's more of a. Differently to this film, that's more of a cult movie, but the genre is something and how it handles it. Like, it's not a Die Hard where it's like, it's wink wink to the camera, and it's like, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, and we're going to have fun with this action movie. Assault on Precinct 13 is fun to watch in parts, but it's also harrowing and really disturbing.
Yeah.
It's kind of got those elements of John Carpenter's other movies where it's got elements of horror in here and there. There's now a review for Assault on Precinct 13, by the way. But with this film, I can understand. Like, okay, maybe it's just that fairly because not everyone's into everything. You're just not as into these, so the aesthetics of this. In terms of the realism thing, I do think that it has internal realism, and it does have. With this one especially, I do think there's a level of. And by the way, grit and realism are not the same thing. But I think this one does have grit in it, but it's not necessarily realistic. Because this is also a world where. Gasoline is a limited resource, and they've got a guy with a flamethrower guitar, and they're all, they're all like, having parties while they go on go to war and stuff.
It's very mad, really, isn't it? Because that's also kind of the thing is Mad Max is very unique, and I appreciate what it's doing, but there is also just there's not really meant to be much logical sense anyway, because most of the characters. Are kind of insane anyway. The most sane people are, our main characters kind of, not even Max per se, but he's somewhat reasonable.
He's deranged a little though in his sort of. We said that it's Tom Hardy's best impression of a caveman in this film.
Yeah, I'm also with him in particular. I'm like, it's definitely not Tom Hardy's peak performance. He's just sort of there.
Well, that's because that character is more of an introduction to the world rather than the protagonist, and I think that actually works for his characterization. I'd argue because although it's Furiosa's story, Mad Max, Max in the story, because he doesn't have as much involvement, doesn't talk as much, and it's more of a physical performance if anything, and I think he actually does a perfect job with what he's given for that. It's more of a case of, he's disconnected from the world. He's just a lone survivor who only gives a shit about himself.
Yeah,
and it's his character arc is to basically serve something, because his whole thing is that he used to be a cop in the previous world. He used to be a police officer.
Yeah.
So, he spends... a police officer is supposed to uphold the law and order. Now this is a world filled with chaos, so it's a complete juxtaposition, and he's had to change completely.
Yeah.
So, obviously not with the specific role of, he's a cop escorting them back home or something. But in a narrative purpose, it's him reconnecting and sort of like how Furiosa wants, she wants... Not retribution. What's the word? Oh God, this is happening.
Redemption.
Redemption. Yeah, she wants redemption. So Furiosa wants redemption, obviously, and so does Max in a sort of way, in a certain way. And that's a common goal that those two characters kind of work towards at a certain point. And I think that's why they work so well together, is because they are kind of very similar, but it's Furiosa is the one who took the action for this story to happen.
Yeah.
Max is sort of along for the ride to give us a I mean, and as well, like, Max doesn't go through many physical changes in the film. He goes through more emotional ones because although he's had like a bit of an arrow in his forehead at the end, the guy's, I mean, Furiosa's bleeding out on the back of a car at the end of the film, like dying, and he's like still completely fine for the most part because he's just he can survive in this world. It's how he helps other people survive is the important thing, and I do think you can make the comment. I don't necessarily believe. I believe the criticism is valid for it, but I can understand people making the argument that Max doesn't say much in this film, but I think he does plenty.
You know what else I'll say? In comparison to everything else that's going on in the film, Max himself is just not very much, is he? There's a lot of much, and then Mad Max himself is sort of less much.
Well, I think, like, to balance that out, I think that's a good thing, because obviously, as you said, everything's so insane, and having that more measured, sort of, everyman as your protagonist, like again, it's like at the beginning where he's just like, his goal is to survive to begin with, and so he takes the very logical steps of, well, I can't undo this chain from the war boy or the door, I'm going to have to carry both, and I'll take the shotgun and I'll threaten them to give me some water so I don't die of thirst, and then to unchain me so that I, and then I'll get in the car, and then I'll go, I'll leave, because these people, helped blow me up in the first place by, like nudging cars and stuff like that, and I was, like, I wouldn't have been here if they hadn't gone. It's not like even like a malicious thing, it's just like, okay, you understand where he's coming from, and he's not necessarily being a bad guy in that instance, and neither are they. It's just people trying to survive. Yeah,
and you can see that in his, his whole sort of, because, he gets little visions of the past or whatever, and it's sort of, that's also him thinking, I should help these people, or I'm like, no, he's got that survival instinct while also having basically voices in his head saying, but you were meant to save us, and he's like...
Yeah, that's his madness, it's more of an internal thing, and I think, again, that works for his arc, is that, at the end, he, like, after... There's only one instance during the climax where he has the vision, and it's the one he has previously where he puts his hand up to his head, which protects him. But besides that, at the end, you kind of get the idea that, like, maybe he's going to stop being haunted by these visions, and he's starting to find, like, a sort of purpose in the world, again, because again, it's that disconnection and then reconnection to the world. But yeah, as you say, it does ground him as the more sort of relatable character.
And then there's another thing I have with this film, which isn't that bad. It's just on its own, there are a couple of things missing that it's very isolated and sort of, again, focused on its, sequence, and like Max's visions are just sort of this weird thing where it's like, if you don't, this film doesn't explain that he's a cop, does it, or used to be a cop?
Well, this is the thing, is that I've read somewhere, or I think it was told to me, that apparently this is more of a, although it's a reboot in that it's obviously recasting Tom Hardy, it's apparently canonically it's a sequel.
Yeah, because it has links to the other films, but on its own,
that is a reference to the first film, where that's a film all about that, and he does say at in the beginning of this film, he does have in his monologue, he says, "I used to be a cop," but that's very brief. But in the other film, I think they. In the first film, I think they bigged that up a bit more, and then the other two, it was a bit more about specific stories.
Well, that's the thing.
But that is a pre-established thing, by the way. So,
I kind of wish at some point, I need to get around to watching the Mel Gibson ones.
I was gonna say, now that we're reviewing this, I think we have a good excuse to do another trilogy episode at some point, but on those.
Yeah, because there's definitely a lot of backstory and stuff that is missing in this film. This film is very focused on the sequence of events that are happening in this film, and not on.
But I don't know. I like that though, because
I'm not saying it's bad for that. I'm just saying there are certain bits where it's like, well, why is Mad Max having these visions per se? It's not. It's very briefly explained, and it's missable as to who Max is.
See, I think that's an acceptable. Like, again, I know that we've talked about this before with like the Christmas episode where we talked about the she homed alone me moment. For me, I appreciate that because it's a moment in the story where were not being explained to.
No,
I do like answers in my films, but don't get me wrong. I am not a massive fan of ambiguous endings. You can fucking cite Gantz. When we watched Gantz, for instance, I was not a fan of that ending. But that being said, I do think when it's earned, or when ambiguity is used in certain ways, I do appreciate its importance there. Again, Assault on Precinct 13 has that ambiguity for the bad guys. None of them speak throughout the entire film. They kind of. That means you can sort of portray them as this supernatural force, but likewise you could just see it as, well, these are just gang members who are super focused on killing our heroes and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I'm like, it is very like, this is a bit mysterious, and it's like, what happened to the world, and what happened to Max, and what happened to, why is this all happening? In this film alone, it's like there's a lot of questions which I'm like, I don't need answers to. But it is always, again, it seems focused on...
As a first-time watcher, it definitely disorients you, I think.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think the vague thing you get is that that's probably his kid, or like a kid that he failed to save. In the beginning, there's a lot more of those flashbacks, and there's like characters that are obviously references to the previous films. We've not seen the previous films, or bits and pieces, so we don't know them. But I think that okay, those could be disorienting, but I think the kid thing, you get that, I think, at a certain point. That's him being tormented by either a child of his own, or a child that he couldn't save, but now that the kid's vision saves him, and it's...
Yeah. But no,
I think it loops back around. This still has character arcs, and they are fulfilled. So
but it's an interesting...
I think it's satisfying.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of... I know we said that the plot isn't, terribly complex, but it is interesting what they do put in there, and the world building and the character building, and it's this interesting sort of chaotic blend of stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense on its own, which is fine.
I think it's the
whole film is like that.
I know I've made a lot of comparisons to Independence Day in this episode, just because that was the most recent one we did, and there was also, I think there are comparable things. I would also compare this film to Jurassic Park in some departments, but I'll get to that in a bit. But in terms of the sort of comparisons to Independence Day, the thing is with this film is that it has all those it's doing that simple story, but it's a very compelling story. I feel for Furiosa. I care about the characters. Maybe not the brides as much, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
They're kind of there to fill the space. I'd call them red shirts, but to be honest, only one of them kicks the bucket. So, but they're there to have a quirky sort of, and also to have they're sort of MacGuffins. I think as MacGuffins, living MacGuffins go, I honestly didn't mind them. I thought they were fine. No. I do think they're probably the actors who play them are definitely not the strongest parts. When you team the Drew Barrymore lookalike with Nicholas Hoult, who's acting his heart out as the war boy, it's unfortunately it's kind of disproportionate.
And it's just weird. They're weird ones anyway, because they are somehow removed from everything. Obviously, they're kept hidden away by Big Boy. What's his name?
Immortan Joe.
Bad guy, big bad, and he's like, I got these women locked up in my sex dungeon, basically.
In my land of the dead safe.
Yeah, but they are obviously they've barely seen. It's a weird thing where a lot of characters in this film are obviously meant to be like the War Boys have just grown up knowing War Boy. That's all they know. They're just chaotic. I drive car, I kill those I get told to kill.
I pray to steering wheel and V8 engine, yeah.
Yeah, they're very enthusiastic though. And then you got the wives who are like, I'm here to breed, and, they seem to have, knowledge of things, because it's someone gives them a book or something, but because they talk of things as if they know stuff. It's
I think what it is, it's the raised in, despite the fact they're sex slaves, by the way, because obviously this is, I need to preface this before I say the next thing. Obviously, they are, from what we see, they're raised in sort of a place of privilege compared to the other survivors, but they are obviously still sex slaves, which is super messed up.
Yeah.
But they obviously they have a more sheltered background, which means that they have been. I mean, there's like piles of books, so they have been doing reading, like you say. So I think theoretically, a lot of them are there, and they know the concept of things. But again, it's like in practicality, like the main one, she obviously in the middle of a chase sequence comes out of hiding and starts climbing with her pregnant ass up into the carriage, going, "We can't breathe in there," and it's like, "Bitch, I'm getting chased by 1,000,000 war boys right now."
Now's not the time. But they are very removed from it all, and they're not used to, getting killed all the time or whatever. And it's like, it's a weird contrast. But again, it makes their characters a bit odd sometimes when they're like, "Oh, I'm falling in love with this war boy," and I'm like,
I think it's well developed because we care about the war boy because he's kind of pathetic and he's likable, but also because she's a character whose the only intimacy she's ever known is from this, warlord rapist. So I think, of course, she's gonna fall for a character like that when they're both two troubled people who have been abused by the same person.
Yeah, that's not really what I meant to
find comfort in each
other. That one works, but there's other stuff with them where they're just they are a little bit awkward. It's like, as you said,
the one that wants to go home all the time. Although that was a nice subversion at the end that I always forget. The one that says, "Oh, maybe he'll forgive us." At the end, obviously, like he's like to Immortan Joe's muscle-bound son, Rictus. She's like, "Rictus, carry me into the car." And then when she gets in the car, she starts fucking around and like sabotaging the car with Immortan Joe in it. It's like, okay, that's character development. She's learned that. Like she used the opportunity. Okay, if I can sneak on there, maybe I can help save the others. Basically, that was character growth. The Drew Barrymore character. I say this because she looks like identical to young Drew Barrymore. She has the goggles, and she's in love with Nicholas Holt's Warboy. There's the blonde one who doesn't really have much character beforehand, but she has the thing of like I think she's the second one who's the most far along or something. With her pregnancy, and so she's like got the bag of seeds from the old woman, and that's kind of symbolic because she's got like some life growing in her, and she's now got this bag of seeds that can help grow life for other people. The one who has the short sort of buzz cut, she seems like the most sort of competent of the bunch, and she seems the one that's sort of been a bit more hardened by things, and I think that's also symbolic in that she has the less revealing clothing, and she's the more sort of competent and assured one. And I think she sort of filled the role of like, okay, another competent character to have in there. And I think, like you can tell that she was she was probably like the second in command, status wise to the leader one, who was the most sort of heavily pregnant.
Yeah, but they're an interesting bunch. I mean,
it's like a seven. What's it? The Magnificent Seven type situation, or Seven Samurai situation. You've got like a bunch of different characters from similar backgrounds who do stand out, I think, when you... maybe not on a first watch. I don't think the blonde one particularly... I don't think that actor does a fantastic job. I think, unfortunately, she's just a bit one note. But her character is given that thing with the seed bag, and it's I think, good symbolism that makes up for bits like that. The one who wants to be recaptured and then switches sides at the end, she doesn't have much to her character throughout the film, but that is like, even though she's, again, it's like a compensation thing. It's like, even though the main characters are Furiosa, Max, and the Warboy, the other characters do get characterization around it that benefits them and is consistent, and they do kind of get like mini character arcs that sort of elevate their experience from being like just sort of MacGuffins. Actually, should we talked about Tom Hardy briefly. What do you think of Charlize Theron in this film?
So that's the one who plays Furiosa.
Yeah.
She does a good job. She's
very robust, I think, as an actor. She's not great at the variety, because obviously I think like a few people, she's doing an American accent in this because she's American and she can't do other accents. But I think she does a good job at those sort of roles of being an action star.
Yeah.
I know she's been in things like Atomic Blonde, which I've not seen, but there are I think she's been in a ton of stuff.
I'm not too familiar, but
she was in Prometheus as a kind of crappy part, but
No,
the most crappy part. 'Cause she's the one that gets that's the the run to the side thing.
Maybe, yeah.
She's the one that doesn't run to the side when the ship's falling.
Yeah. But no, I think in this film, I mean, every character has a purpose, and Furiosa and Max kind of drive a lot of the. Obviously, they're the two.
What
main
a pun,
ones.
Joe! What a pun!
I didn't mean for it, but
ding, 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 ding.
But no, they are. They're obviously. She's kind of the. It's her plan to escape, and with then it's like seek redemption. As you said.
Her story. It's her story.
And then she does a good job of driving it along, and being she sort of wrangles in Max a little bit, and it's like, I need your help, and
Well, they need each other basically, because he needs a way of escaping, and she needs the extra hands basically, so the extra sort of competency, because otherwise they're not going to get through. They're not going to get through it. So that there is a mutual, sort of symbiotic relationship, and then the war boy is, that's just an ideological sort of thing, as you say. He's a child soldier basically, and he's raised to believe that he's going to go to Valhalla. But eventually he starts to have doubts when when he actually starts to talk to the characters and realize that he's failed in Morton Joe, and he's not good at being a soldier, but he's very good at being a mechanic and sort of a driver. You know
what his turning point is? It's when Immortan Joe says mediocre.
That's it. Yeah, I mean that's that's another thing.
Is, but
yeah, it's. I mean, it's. Oh god, that's the thing. That's the thing is that this world is. It's like a score for like a Dance Revolution game. It's like mediocre. It's like, who says that? It's as you say with it. This is like there's a lot. It's very much in this film. I understand why that can be a turn off for some people. I think I just resonate with it so much. I love it.
Yeah. And I can see that.
It's this, and it's very. I think similarly, it can be very quotable in certain. I mean, obviously, there's the infamous "That's bait," which obviously is the gif that's used everywhere on the internet all the time.
Not sure I've ever seen it, to be honest. So,
well, you've you know what an interweb is, don't you, Joe? So yeah, you've been on the e-net.
Yeah, but that one I'm not so familiar with. When you pointed it out, I was like, oh, is it?
I think that's probably because I spend a bit more time, to be fair, on social media. And then you've got the special effects, which are sort of, they are seamlessly blended when they are in there. There are a few that are obviously a bit dated. I think that the war rig crash scene it looks just because it's in slow motion as well. Some of that hasn't aged the best, but it still looks like passable or good.
It's fine. I have no
it's better than like the most recent Alien film that came out 2 years later, where the fucking alien clips through the floor like it's a Gmod model. So.
Yeah. No, I have with the action is done very well. The CGI, the practical effects, it's almost perfect. That stuff is obviously it's the eye catcher, so it is. They've put a lot of work into that, and you can obviously there's a lot of stunt work, and it does look quite. That the action itself, I'd say, is very cool.
Yeah, no, I mean it's. I think it's the only film in modern history that's managed to keep up the pace of this kind of action. Yeah. Like it never feels like it's like stopping to mellow down. Like it just feels constant, and even the few moments where you do get it as a bit more mellow, like until that nighttime sequence at the end. Like it's there's still tension throughout. Like. When they're sitting in the cab of the war rig, and like Max keeps finding guns everywhere, and it's a really, really great sequence. So the only technical filmmaking negative I have with this film is just that it's quite obvious that they're doing day for night with the night sequences, because they're all like bright blue, the lighting's all off a little bit.
Yeah.
During the day, however, this film looks astonishingly beautiful.
Like, you could say it's an aesthetic choice, but it does have a weird sort of colouring, a weird grading to it when it's
I think it's just because they had to do it in the desert. Or, they wanted to do it in the desert, and unfortunately, how are you going to light it in the desert? You can't really do that. During the night, it's just pitch black.
But it's not something you're going to focus on too much. You might pick up on it occasionally, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not like woods that you could have at nighttime where you blast a few lights in from around the place, and you put like some mist in there, and it looks all spooky, but it still looks dark, even though there's tons of light.
Yeah.
You can't really do that when there's not anything obstructing the light sources from miles around. And you can't really have like light coming from the camera or whatever. So you kind of, I guess, unless they wanted to do it on a sound stage, there's not much they could have done for that. I know that this did have a very troubled production. I know that Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron grew to hate each other during this film because they were filming in the desert, and it was obviously very extreme conditions, and they're still having to give like these fantastic performances. I don't know if this happened with. I don't know if anything controversial was there with Nicholas Hoult. I think he was just there for along for the ride. I think he was probably just being. I mean, they were all being professionals, but apparently those two never want to work with each other again. So, just because they don't really know each other, but it's just that when they did work with each other, it was obviously it's just you're waiting there in the desert to get shots set up, and you're going to get on each other's nerves. But yeah, and then this is 2 years. Oh no, this is 3 years actually after the Tom Hardy was in another movie with a mask in it that was very similar to this one, called The Dark Knight Rises, where he was an incoherent man in a mask, and now he's the one that's coherent, and the villain is again a guy in a mask that you can barely understand what he's saying. It's just an interesting little note there. But yeah, I think I don't know if I'd want to see like a sequel to this with Tom Hardy in it, just because this hits the notes. Like, what are you going to do better than this?
Yeah, I mean, it's got a solid ending to it, and it has obviously it's like hope, and everything's probably going to work out and stuff, and Mad Max just going to go off and do his thing.
For the sheer spectacle and the story, I could definitely see it working, making another one, but. Just, I mean, the climax of this film is just. I mean, how could you top that?
I think. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like all the explosions are amazing. they look so good in this film. I think most of them are just they're obviously real, most of them. But even the CG ones, like that one in the sandstorm, because of the way they've worked the particle effects. I mean, it just looks amazing. And then the music in this film as well. It's definitely an underrated aspect of it. I love the music in this. I think it's fantastic.
It fits very well, and again, it follows the action sequences.
I think the sign of a good soundtrack is either that it jumps out at you, or it works so well that you only notice it listening to it in the abstract.
Yeah.
I think a forgettable soundtrack will always, or a forgettable soundtrack or a bad soundtrack will always jump out at you. The ones that do jump out at you that are good are usually because they're like pop songs or something. But I think if it blends into the background, it blends with the film, that usually means it's a good soundtrack. And I think in this instance, it definitely is.
Yeah. And I mean, they also have the whole thing of, again, Guitar Man. So there's like the in-world soundtrack as well. Of the guitar driving.
Yeah. That helps a lot. Having that diegesis for like that. Yeah. So I guess we should get into final thoughts then about the film.
Yeah, like I think Mad Max is good. It's a good action thrill ride. There's character building. There's world building. Again, I have like it's a little. There's some bits just a little bit weird, and it's not really my aesthetic. Like it's a bit much sometimes. But for what it is, as you said, very focused. It's a sequence of chase action, a lone story basically, with characters that have stories that arc out into films that have existed before, which I'm very curious to see now.
Yeah, me too. We have that open to us now as a round. Yeah. So.
But I mean, I'd probably rate it 7 to 8. Like it's a good film.
Yeah, fair. No, yeah.
It definitely, it definitely has potential to be a classic. I'm not sure how well it will age per se, but
I mean, already I think it's only been like 6 years, and I think that this is remembered fondly more than anything that came out in 2015. I can't think of any other movie really.
In recent times, I think it is. It's pretty much a standout. But then there's also a lot of films in recent times which I'm like, that is just awful. So, Mad Max is a very good film. So,
I think it's one that will stick out to cinephiles for forever. I think, people like us who study film, I think it will be one of those films that stands the test of time.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said that you'd give it a 7 or 8. Did you settle on one of those?
7.5. We'll give it 7.5.
Okay, 7.5. Okay, so now this is the time in the podcast where we play the opposite roles. You have the more sort of critical and measured response to something that I wholeheartedly love, basically. So I brought Jurassic Park up earlier. There is comparisons you make with the special effects and the sort of effect that this practicality and the stunt work in this film has had. I think that's benchmark for this. Jurassic Park was benchmark for its blend of special effects and practical, similar to this, but more for its special effects, which are still. Yeah. I mean, as much as I was hard on that film, they still look fantastic. Maybe apart from the raptors and that daylight sequence when they're CG, don't look fantastic, just in the texture work. But the animation looks fantastic. I was a bit hard on that film in general, but you're gonna hate me now because obviously I think I gave that film like an 8 or something. This film it's got to be like a 9.7 for me. I absolutely adore this film. It's one of my favorite films. I cannot stress this enough. This is one of the best action movies ever made, I think. Yeah, but definitely one of the best modern ones. I think I cannot stress enough. If there's one thing that I would recommend out of all the things we've done on the podcast so far, if I could only recommend one of them, it'd be this. So far, I do think the next one we're going to do, that might be another challenging one for the best, because I think this is the best one we're going to do this season. But to be fair, the next one could top it for me. I just want you to understand, Joe, that this is my Jurassic Park at the moment. It's definitely not one that I feel is nostalgic for, but comparatively with what we've done so far this season. Mad Max Fury Road. It's an action extravaganza. Watch it.
I don't disagree. I highly recommend it as well. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, we've been 2 More Takes. That was Jack and Joe. I'm gonna put it the wrong way around. See, because I'm mad. I'm gonna spray my teeth with silver spray paint right now, and you can fucking witness me as I make it to the gates of Valhalla.
Witness us.
Turn up the nitro, bitch. See you later.
See you around, everyone.